Hello there, everyone, and welcome back, and welcome to the second day of Squatchmas. So, I gotta ask, what are you snacking on tonight? Be sure to tell me in the comments below. And don't worry, at the end of mine tonight, I'll be sharing one of my favorites with you. Anyway, let's get together near the tree and listen to another encounter that confirms what we have always known. Dogs are often smarter than us. If you're in Bigfoot territory and your dog goes crazy, I'm here to tell you, pay attention to your dog. My brother asked me to watch his place while he was on his honeymoon. I hadn't been there before because they just bought the place together about a month before they got married. Living in San Jose, I jumped at the chance to stay at his new place. This was somewhere east of Willow Creek, California. His zip code was for Burnt Ranch, California, but his place wasn't in Burnt Ranch. That's as close as I'm going to get you to where he now still lives. Anyway, my brother had sent me pictures of the place, and I was all jumpy to get up there. I always envisioned living in the forest or some wild animal, which his new place practically was. If you sat on his back deck, you were surrounded by very thick trees. Beyond them, though you couldn't see it, was the Trinity River, and beyond that started hills and mountains. His land went all the way to the Trinity River. My brother had 2 dogs, which was the real reason he needed someone to stay there, as they could not take them with them to Hawaii. Pork Chop and Hambone, that were their names, but no one ever used their full names. They were just affectionately known as Porky and Hammy. My brother brought the dogs down to San Jose, which is where the wedding and all the family was. After the wedding, I took Porky and Hammy for the drive north back home. My brother left very detailed instructions on everything, and I had no problem with any of it. They hadn't had time to put any fencing in, so when the dogs needed to go out, I had to put them on leashes and walk them around. He told me, if those dogs got loose out there, I would never catch them. Running from a human and teasing them as if they could almost catch them was kind of a game. The one time they got loose, he said they were halfway down the Trinity River before he got them. So coupled with their playful behavior, there were also very real dangers out there that they shouldn't be running loose. So my brother impressed upon me over and over, keep them on a tight leash. They weren't used to living in the forest yet. I think big old Pork Chop had some pit bull in him. He had a really big chest, and he was all muscle. Keeping him under control took everything I had when he was interested in something. Hammy was a lot easier. He didn't pull as hard, and he listened to commands very well. Now, both had been through the exact same kind of training, but Pork Chop was apparently a bad student. Neither dog was aggressive in the least, but they were friendly with people and other dogs. They did go after anything they thought of as prey, though. Rabbits, squirrels, normal dog stuff. But they were good with most other dogs and very easy to be with. One morning it was foggy and a little on the cool side. It had rained on and off all through the night. The dogs woke me up howling to get out. They almost dragged me out of bed. I got up and had to dance around them to start coffee, so it would be ready when we came back in. This was the 3rd morning staying there, I think, and this was the craziest they had been in the morning yet. Usually they got me up and would just wait patiently by their leashes hung by the back door. I went in and got the coffee started, then walked over to the back door to leash them. They were both wildly prancing around. I could hardly get the leashes on them. They were whining as if they were very impatient and really had to go. I opened the door, and it was almost like a cartoon the way they dragged me right off my feet. I fell and was dragged down the first couple of steps before I grabbed the deck rail and put a stop to the craziness. I'm 5 feet 10 inches and 190 pounds. I'm not a big man, but neither am I small. Yet those dogs pulled me around like I was just a little paper doll. They got out the door, and they started growling and barking non-stop. Then I caught on that Porky's bark was different than usual. There was a deep growling sound every time he took a breath in. His bark was now more growl than bark. His hair was all ruffled up on his neck. So was Hammy's. And they were both pulling so hard on their harnesses, they looked like they were about to rip right out of them, and were mostly standing on their back legs because they were pulling forward, and I was pulling backwards. Now, this shocked me because even though Porky had the look of a pit bull with a big blocky head, jaws, and everything else, he was not in the least an aggressive dog. Not to humans or other dogs that I've seen. Until the prior year, my brother had a third dog, a little Chihuahua, and he told me that that little dog would cower and intimidate Porky with just a few yips. That little Chihuahua ruled the house until the day it passed away. My brother said that when that little dog wanted something that Porky had, whether it was a toy, a bed, whatever, a whole room, all that Chihuahua had to do was go up and growl and snap or act like he was going to bite at Porky, and Porky would give it up right away, whatever it was. He never snapped back or growled back at that little dog. So to see this behavior, I was shocked. Not to mention Hammy was a big, fluffy teddy bear most of the time. I'd never heard him bark like this. Now, the part of California there is well known as being Bigfoot Ground Zero. That area has had a ton of Bigfoot sightings through the years. The Hoopa Reservation is just up the road. Go further north, and you will get to the place where the famous video was made of a Bigfoot walking in Bluff Creek. The Trinity National Forest is also right there. And there are steep hills full of timber and every kind of plant and animal imaginable. The Trinity River has good fishing, and the human population is not dense here. In other words, this is prime Bigfoot area. Now, I knew all of that before this happened, but it didn't mean much to me. I wasn't looking for Bigfoot, so I assumed he wouldn't be looking for me. I'm not saying that I didn't believe in Bigfoot. I'm saying I gave it no thought. I don't wonder if I'm going to see fairies and brownies and little wood sprites every time I hike in a forest either. Get my meaning? I don't think about it. When I got myself and the dogs under control, I kept a very tight grip on the leash, and I walked them down the steps to the yard. They were pulling to run out in the yard, and that wasn't happening. The fog that morning was so thick I could barely see 10 to 12 feet. I waited for them to get busy and do their thing right there past the steps, which it seemed they had done many other mornings, but they had no interest in that. There was something out there in the fog upsetting them very much. It had been overcast all morning. All the fog and no sun on the horizon made it very difficult to see. Everything past about 10 feet was just fog and mist. You couldn't see a thing. With zero visibility and the dogs going wild, I felt some kind of a nudge of alarm. If they weren't going to do their thing, I decided I wasn't staying out there. But getting those dogs back inside, well, that was easier said or thought than done. They were not moving. I tied Porky's leash to the banister rail and picked up Hammy and took him in. I did this only in desperation because they would not move. After I got Hammy in, I quickly came back out and did the same with Porky, who really is a porker. He was not easy to pick up. I got them inside, and they kept barking and digging at the back door. I kept telling them to stop barking, but they continued. I couldn't make sense of their behavior. Then Hammy got quiet and quickly came over to where I was sitting at the table. He looked at me and crawled under the table, sat on my feet and whined, and then he began to breathe really fast, and he was trembling. Now Porky was going wilder than ever at the door. I mean, he was backing up and launching himself at the door. I was afraid he was going to go high enough to break the glass windows and go right out the door. I really wasn't sure what to do, but I knew I had to do something. I got up and I walked over and tried to get a hold of Porky to get him away from the door. He was snarling, tilted his head back and snapped at me. Then he focused back on the door. For what it's worth, I don't think he was actually trying to bite me. I think he just wanted me to leave him alone. During this scuffle with Porky, there was a point that my eyes went out the back door window. I froze, I freaked, and I stopped trying to grab Porky. All I could do was stare outside. No lying, there was a Bigfoot just a few feet from the porch. He was looking up at the back door, looking up at me. I couldn't hear anything over Porky's barking, but I could see its lip was curled up, like it was sneering or possibly even growling. The teeth struck me, though. They were yellow. I don't mean like a nasty yellow. They were more like a person who has taken good care of their teeth all their life, but when they're a lot older, it's that weird yellowness they get to their teeth. It's more yellow than ivory. That's the best I can describe it. I couldn't believe it. I was looking at a real live Bigfoot. Now, I know the deck out there is about 3 feet off the ground, and the Bigfoot's knees, they were just below the deck floor. I know that sounds impossible. Knees almost 3 feet off the ground? But that is what I saw. I think it was about 9 feet tall, up to the dome of its head. I've watched a lot of supposed Bigfoot videos since that day, and if I could tell you what it most looked like by its body shape, it was a lot more like the Paul Freeman black Bigfoot, but with really dark brown fur. It wasn't chunky and rounded out like Patty was, but it was the same color. I believe the one out there in the fog was a male. I don't know, his frame was big and solid, but he somehow looked less bulky than Patty, yet stronger. He looked like he could rip a telephone pole right in half. He was that kind of solid and strong. I hope this comes across the way I mean it. I only looked at his whole face for just a second, if that, because as soon as our eyes met, it gave me the feeling I needed to not be looking at it, like it was going to get mad. So I looked at the mouth and the teeth again. I remembered those yellow teeth very clearly. They were very much like ours, but the canine teeth were bigger than the ones we have. I don't mean they were fangs, they weren't, but they were very noticeable. I promise you, the set of chompers I saw in that mouth, those are not the chompers of a vegetarian. The whole time Porky was still going crazy at the back door. I bent down below the window and I tried to get Porky to be quiet and to come away, but that was not working. I took a quick peek out the door window again, and it was still there. It was raining steady now, and strangely enough, I remember seeing the rain rolling down its head and face on the fur. I had a burst of power, and this time I bent down and I grabbed Porky by the chest. He was snapping at me and the air, but he didn't get me. He got loose and then he took off down the hallway to the end bedroom. When he got loose, he pulled me and I face-planted right on the kitchen floor. Right then I was thinking that Bigfoot was about to come through the back door, and if it wanted to, I know it could have. I got up as fast as I could, and I looked out the back door, only to see its backside as it was walking away. But it did turn, and it looked back at the house once as it walked. That was why Porky took off down the hall, I thought. Porky wanted to look out the window and watch it go. How the dog knew that it walked that way with all of his barking, that's a mystery. I don't know how he could have heard that. But dogs do know things, don't they? I went down the hall, and Porky had his paws up on the windowsill, barking and growling. He was breathing hard from all the barking, and he was beginning to sound hoarse when he breathed or growled. I stayed back just enough from the window, but I did see the butt end of that Bigfoot as it walked toward the Trinity River. I don't know if it went to the river, but that was the direction it was going. When it was out of sight with all the rain and fog, Porky's barks became frustrated whining, like his prey got away. I felt like I had just done an all-day leg workout, because I was breathing hard and my legs felt like they were full of jelly. It was a while before the dogs were back to normal again. An hour later, they did go out, and at first it was okay, but then suddenly, Porky got the scent of the Bigfoot, and he started growling and carrying on, and Hammy pulled me the other way going up the steps, wanting to get into the house. So Hammy was pulling me back up to the house, but Porky, he wanted to go in the direction of the Bigfoot. Now by that time, most of the fog was long gone, and the rain had stopped, so I could see that there was nothing around. I managed to get both dogs over to the other side of the house. They did their business, and then we went back inside. The next week and a half I paid very close attention to those dogs. I hadn't had a dog since we were kids because I live in a small apartment, and I have most of my adult life. So paying attention to dogs and figuring out meanings to different barks and growls, it just wasn't something I understood. Well, I do now. Now, the rest of the time that I was there, I was very, very careful. I definitely paid attention to the dogs, mostly to Porky. I think another Bigfoot came near one other time while I was there. It was about 2 a.m. Porky woke me up with his fur bristled and a very scary low growl, and the same kind of barks that started the other day. He nudged up under the blinds. I was scared there was one right out there outside the bedroom window. Well, if there was one out there, he didn't come too close. Porky was on alert for about 10 minutes, racing from window to window along the back side of the house. After that, he finally came in, gave a couple woofs, got up on the bed, and turned around a few times and laid down, letting out a few soft woofs every now and then, like I haven't forgotten about you, Mr. Bigfoot. I do think that dog slept with one eye open. Now, the thing is, I had figured out the dynamic between Hammy and Porky. Hammy was only brave when Porky was, only up to a point. Once things got intense, I learned that Hammy would nope out and he would go hide and Porky would handle everything. Well, that was the closest another Bigfoot might have come to the house again, at least when I was there. When my brother came home from his honeymoon, I told him everything. He listened, and he did think about it. He had a lot of questions. His wife grew up in Northern California towards the Oregon border. She knew a lot more about Bigfoot than either of us. She listened, and she said she believed me. She had wondered if there was one out there anyway. When she said that she was a full believer, my brother suddenly became more interested and took it more seriously. All of a sudden, he and his wife were remembering other times the dogs had awakened them in the middle of the night, and strange things that had happened outside. They began to think that maybe they had had some very up-close brushes with a Bigfoot and didn't know it. They said, though, they didn't think one ever came up to the house the way I described it. Then my sister-in-law stopped and she said, maybe one had. And she went on to describe a whole nother scenario, not so dissimilar from how it happened with me with the dogs. Now we think, together after talking about it, the fog might have had something to do with it. Maybe it didn't realize it was so close to a house. Then maybe it heard the dogs, and it came to check things out. We all know Bigfoot and dogs don't usually mix well. They have been vigilant, but they have not found any prints or anything else, and they have been looking. They agree. Dogs are the early warning system for all kinds of things, and that definitely goes double for a Bigfoot, whether their tendency is to attack or to cower and hide. Always watch the animals around you. They are way smarter than most of us. Signed, Kieran J. Thanks, Kieran, for sending your story in. Dogs are intelligent beings, and often they're far more intuitive than we mere humans are. The best bargain mankind ever struck was the one between man and canines, where they agreed to be helpful to each other. Well, that's just my opinion anyway. So I told you that I would share a favorite holiday snack with you, and I keep thinking I've shared it at least once or twice in the last couple of Squatchmas years, but then I get a flurry of emails asking for it again. It just simply isn't the holidays around here without a plate of these, and I mean Buckeye candies. If you like Reese's peanut butter cups, you will absolutely love Buckeye candy. It's a peanut butter ball with vanilla and sugar. You roll it all together, and then you dip it in melted chocolate. You leave the top portion of the peanut butter visible, and that way it kind of looks like the nut from a Buckeye tree. Now there's a picture of real Buckeyes and the real Buckeye candy. I'm going to put the recipe on the screen for you, and then I'm going to also put it down in the video description below. Now, trust me, these are very rich and sweet, so we only make them usually at the holidays around here, and we can only each eat a couple of them. They're pretty rich. Now, while most Midwesterners, and probably a lot of the U.S., is familiar with this recipe, I know there are a lot of people from all around the world who might not be familiar with them, and I just wanted to share the joy of these deliciously rich and sweet goodies for anyone looking for a new holiday treat. All right, everyone. Well, that's going to bring day 2 of Squatchmas to a close. I do hope you've enjoyed it. We'll be meeting up again here tomorrow, but until then, always remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. Thanks for listening.